Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is a little bit something different. I'm going to be discussing what I like to call unseen poltergeist. Uh, and what I mean by that is the unseen and unmade sequences from the 1982 classic horror film Poltergeist. There's actually a surprising amount of deleted scenes and unmade scenes that were in the script but didn't get filmed, or stuff that was shot but wound up getting ultimately cut from the final cut of the movie. And before I get around to discussing and talking about these sequences more in depth, I would like to give a special shout out to Ryan for requesting this topic for this video. And if there's another topic, film, TV show, or commentary, or something along those lines that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. The link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, Poltergeist, it has a handful of deleted scenes. In fact, there's actually one deleted scene that actually was found fairly recently. It was found by a Poltergeist fan, and it wound up on the Poltergeist film Instagram page in August of 2023. And this is a short scene with Beatrice Straight's character, Dr. Lesh, and this other actor uh, named Edward Ashley. And Edward Ashley was playing a role in the film where he was a colleague of Dr. Lesh, who I believe he was like one of the guys at the university that was her mentor, or was one of the guys who was funding her research. And yeah, he plays another paranormal expert. And what happens in this sequence, it involves Dr. Lesh talking to Edward Ashley, going over the incidents at the Freeling residence, and then talking about potentially getting Tangina involved to help the Freelings with their haunting. And it's a sequence that definitely didn't need to be in the movie. I can understand why it was cut. It was probably cut for pacing, and not necessarily due to any other reason other than that. The sequence was on YouTube for a short amount of time, but it got copyright striked, and Steven Spielberg and his lawyers got involved and completely put a stop to that real quick. I think it's still on TikTok though. That's actually how I watched it. There was a link on TikTok that showed the sequence, because what happened was Edward Ashley found out that the scene was cut, and he was not happy about that. So he wrote a letter to Steven Spielberg asking for a copy of that sequence, and then he had it okayed with Beatrice Straight, the actress who plays Dr. Lesh, and Spielberg actually did uh, send him a tape. He sent him a tape with the deleted scene on it, and the tape wound up in Ashley's estate after he passed away. And then he wound up, I guess what happened is, before he passed away, he gave it to a friend of his, and then that friend of his put the tape up on, um, I don't know if it was up on eBay, but it was one of those things where it was ultimately available for sale, and he sold it to Poltergeist Film. And then the same guy behind Poltergeist Film, he then took a recording of the scene, I believe, like his phone or something. He didn't even post a recording of it that actually was a digital high quality rip of it or anything. So that was kind of lame, to be perfectly honest, that it's just recorded by with his phone on his TV. But it was still cool that it was something that I was able to see. I can't show the footage for obvious reasons because I don't want Steven Spielberg and his lawyers to be on my ass. But yeah, it was a short sequence. It was cool to see as a fan of Poltergeist, but it really wasn't that interesting of a sequence. Um, the story behind the sequence and its existence and it being a tape that was uh, obtained by the actor in the scene because he asked Spielberg for a copy and then it was ultimately sold to a Poltergeist fan. That's a lot more interesting than the sequence itself. Now, the ever deleted scenes, though, are a lot more fascinating to me. So there's one that a lot of Poltergeist fans are already aware of, and that involves Diane Freeling, Joe Beth Williams, and a alternate version of the scene where she's being dragged up the wall by the spirit, by the beast. There was an alternate scene that was filmed but wasn't used. And what happened was where there was that stain on the wall above the bed, it formed into this massive tentacles. And Diane was then dragged across this massive tentacles. And there's actually photos that show this sequence, or at least part of this sequence. This is actually a quote from the 1982 Cinefx article about Poltergeist and its visual effects. And before I go any further, I want to give a shout out to the site runner of poltergeist3.com because he uh, he looked at the article, got the quote, and he scanned a bunch of photos and stuff like that. And the webmaster or the guy who's behind the site, he is a massive fan of Poltergeist, and he has honestly created a very invaluable resource for Poltergeist, and honestly the entire Poltergeist franchise as a whole. And this is just one example out of many. Like this is a really great resource for research if you are really starting to get into Poltergeist, or you just want to know more about Poltergeist or the other Poltergeist films. So this is a quote from Cinefx. At times, we got overwhelmed by fun effects and audacious ideas, Mitch Suskin remarked, possibly more than the film required. And Mitch, he worked on the film when it comes to some of the makeup effects and visual effects sequences. The one scene that sticks in my mind is where Diane is pulled up the wall, across the ceiling, and down the other side. During that, there was going to be a kind of stain in her path, something foreshadowing the closet turning into a mouth. It was a pulsating, organic, ugly thing. The concept was eventually discarded, but not before the physical effects crew had gone ahead and built it, and it went before the cameras. We made a large latex bladder for the stain, Mike Wood related, another guy who worked on the film when it comes to the effects. There were holes in the wall so we could actuate it manually from behind, and we had people strapped to the outside of the set putting their hands through. During the scene, the stain was to have grown bigger and more amorphous, and the girl was supposed to roll through it from her bed. A more risque notion was to be the violation of Diane Freeling by unseen forces as she involuntarily defied gravity in her upturned room. Wood contrived a special harness to facilitate rape movements in that position, but when the idea endangered the picture's PG rating, it too was scrapped. An alternate scene of Jo Beth Williams writhing in bed remains in the film, but its darker implications are less apparent. So they were originally going to do something like straight out of The Entity, but then they were like, yeah, it's a little bit too intense for the rating that we're trying to go for. So let's not go there. Uh, I'm okay with that. I think the way that they handled things was honestly just as effective when it comes to providing th some, much needed intensity to that sequence, as well as suspense, and there were implications of what the ghost might be doing or might have done, or might have tried to do. You didn't actually have to show those implications, um but it's cool that they, worked on an effect, and it's actually a pretty cool looking effect, but, I mean, you could have had the effect, but not had the rape, like, you could have done it that way. Um, from the same Cinefex article, there are other things that are mentioned, like during the scene where Dan, Steve, and Dana rush outside to save Robbie from the tree. There was a deleted scene that had the Freelings ensnared by uh, enormous moving branches that blocked the passageways outside the house. Spielberg felt it reduced the intensity of the sequence, so then it was cut. Uh, there was an alternate sort of take when you had the scene involving the spirits coming down the stairs. Richard Edlund is actually quoted here. He's like, "We did twice as many ghost scenes as those that appeared in the final cut." Dr. Lesh watches the videotape of the ghost, she says there are hundreds. Later, Diane is shown screaming, "That thing is in there with my baby." And by the way, that was something that was shown in the trailer. So there's a portion of the extra footage that could actually be seen in the film's original theatrical trailer. But apparently, during filming, Spielberg couldn't make up his mind about the ghost coming down the stairs. So it's originally you were supposed to see a truly evil spirit, the beast, surrounded by good spirit lights. This is eventually changed to show a graceful female spirit coming down the steps, surrounded by the others. There were also alternate versions of scenes that were filmed as well. There was a different version of the giant head, which lunges out of the closet door towards Steve. And this was actually filmed to add industrial light and magic, but then it was later discarded when Spielberg decided the face looked too human and not scary enough. The head was then redesigned, and then the scene was reshot. ILM also did a very expensive alternate version of the effect when these ghostly hands pop out of the television set early on in the film. But Spielberg didn't like the look of that. He felt that the animated version that was done earlier was scarier, so the expensive stop motion effects take by ILM, which utilized a lot of groundbreaking, revolutionary effects at the time to create glass-like hands that pop out of the television screen, that was ultimately thrown to the cutting room floor. And at the time, it was the most expensive effect shot that ILM had ever done. So I get why Spielberg cut it, but I honestly feel it's a shame that it isn't available in some form for people to see, considering how much work ILM put into creating that particular effect. Now, there were some other stuff too, like there were in an earlier draft of the script, there was a scene that was likely never filmed. Right before the Freelings are shown knocking on the door of the Tuthill's house, Steve was supposed to have gone into the crawl space under the house in an attempt to find some sort of explanation for the chairs moving around on the kitchen floor above, but that was probably cut or not filmed for pacing reasons. There was also another sequence from the kitchen scene that was cut that involved Carol Ann being dragged across the kitchen floor. Well, some of Michael Wood's kitchen effects ended up being cut. And this is a quote from an issue of Cine Fantastique. Uh, at the end, Carol Ann made one trip that was real fast, said Wood. We rigged it so she hit the wall wearing a breakaway helmet and struck her head through a breakaway wall. That ended up on the cutting room floor, even though it was a good trick and it looked good. And then one more thing in terms of of a extra deleted scene, according to actor Martin Cassella, there was a scene that was filmed but deleted showing him being lifted up into the air and bitten by the beast outside the children's uh, bedroom door. And Martin Casella's character, his character's name was Marty. He's the one that wound up like tearing his face apart in the mirror, and he like ate the bad chicken, and saw the steak like moving around by itself on the kitchen counter. So yeah, there's some actually there are some photos. Martin shared them on social media um, that show him in a different position, in a different sort of spot that he was in the actual film when it comes to some of the scenes involving him dealing with the beast. It actually shows him being lifted up, shows like some kind of liquid or something coming out of his mouth. And that actually ties into the novelization, because the novelization of Poltergeist by James Caan, it features a lot of extra stuff, a lot of extended sequences, a lot of things that either weren't filmed or weren't necessarily in the script, or were there but didn't wind up being on the final shooting script. And so I just want to read those off. And this is from a website called armchaircinema.com. So at the opening of the book, Diane is preparing Robbie's 8th birthday party. The movie actually opens up with Diane cleaning up the house. During the birthday party, Robbie gets involved in a party game in which he has to look for clues for a prize. While searching outside for clues, he reaches into a pile of bricks and something bites him. While moving the bricks, he discovers the clown doll, which had been upstairs in the bedroom. Later, the party ends when Carol Ann starts screaming from her parents' bedroom. The family finds her parked in front of the snowy TV screen. The night after the party, there is a dinner table sequence in which Carol Ann reveals that she had a dream involving ghosts dressed like the people in the photographs pasted in her grandmother's scrapbook. Stephen tells Robbie that the tree is named Ebenezer. The stacking chairs sequence takes place in the afternoon after Diane and Carol Ann get back from the psychiatrist's office. We learn that Dr. Lesch's first name is Martha. We learn Marty's last name is Lewandowski and that he is 23 years old. We also learn that Ryan's last name is Mitchell and that he is skeptic about ghosts. In the scene in which Diane shows Stephen the sliding chair, the chair moves towards the stove. In the movie, it moved from the stove to the chairs. We learn that Tangina is 52 years old and that as a child, she lost her parents in a train crash. She is seeking Dr. Lesch's help because her visions are causing her to lose sleep. When the vortex opens up and sucks Carol Ann into the next dimension, all the objects in the room are pushed up against the closed closet door. In the film, all of the objects were inside the closet itself. In the movie, the clown was in the closet. In the book, it is in the corner. After Carol Ann is taken to the other side, all of the objects in the bedroom are blown towards the closet, but the clown never moves. In the movie, the doll flies off the bed and into the closet. In the movie, Steve jumps into the freshly dug pool looking for Carol Ann. In the book, Steve and Diane feel around in the water with their hands. There is a lengthy explanation of how Tangina and Dr. Lesch meet and how they come to the service of the Freelings. Tangina attends a lecture of the Psychic Society where Dr. Lesch is speaking. Afterwards, Tangina meets up with Lesch and asks for her help with her visions so she can sleep at night. Lesh agrees to run some tests on her sleep patterns in the lab, and later in the lab, Tangina is hooked up with electrodes so she can be monitored. In a deep sleep, Tangina has a vivid dream in which she is floating in a place that seems to be neither here nor there, a cloudy, unfocused place occupied by a dark spirit called Sekadu, a fire spirit named Fantabel, and a tree spirit whose name is not given. Below this display, she sees dozens of human like spirits dressed in period clothes who seem to be milling about aimlessly. Also, in this space is another being, a 5-year-old girl who continually calls out to her mother. Tangina hears her cries but can't seem to make out her name. After the incident in the lab, Tangina tells Dr. Lesh about the little girl, but can't tell her any more than that. Ryan gets the idea to follow the scan data that the computer picked up from Tangina's lab experiment. Late that night, using a portable transmitter, Ryan, Marty, and Dr. Lesh and Tangina pile into a van to follow the transmission, with Tangina asleep in the back. Driving through the California countryside for several hours, they finally get a break when the signal leads them to a small subdivision called Cuesta Verde. The quartet pile out of the van with Tangina in a somnambulist state. She starts to scream and then takes off at a dead run. Half a block away, she runs up the lawn of a house, and then begins banging on the door. Steve answers, and Dr. Lesh sheepishly asks if they can come in. There is a scene at Dana's school during lunch as she talks to her friends about what has happened to Carol Ann. In the scene in which Marty is bitten by one of the ghosts, we follow him upstairs as he searches the house, looking for a transmitter box that could be the source of Carol Ann's voice. First, he searches Dana's room and finds nothing. Then he tries Steve and Diane's bedroom, nothing. Then he tries their bathroom and finds when he tries to open their cabinet under the sink that the doors won't budge. He hears a groaning and sees an eerie green light coming from behind it, which scares him so much that he leaves. Finally, when he picks the lock on the kid's bedroom door, something invisible lunges at him and bites him. We also learn that Dr. Lesh is 61 years old. After the scene in which Marty peels the skin off his face in the mirror, he runs back through the kitchen where time seems to slow down. Eventually, he stops, frozen in mid run. A cluster of spiders starts crawling across the kitchen floor toward him and proceed to crawl up his pants leg, followed by rats and then worms. The vermin begin to eat his flesh until he is nothing but a skeleton. Finally, he is completely eaten away to nothing. The scene in which the family and scientists see the white womanly spirit come down the stairs is preceded by three other spirits, the three that Tangina saw in her dream earlier, and they dance around the living room and are eventually dispersed by the white womanly spirit. Marty returns from his nightmare in the kitchen, apparently it was all a dream. While the family watches the spirits in the living room, Marty runs down the hall to the bathroom. There he sees his hands melting and then watches as he turns into a hideous humanoid creature. I believe that was intended to be like the beast that you saw in the doorway in the film, where Diane yells at it, to stay away from my baby. Uh, he then goes insane and returns to the living room without any clothes on. Dr. Lesh later tells Diane that he is packed up and flown home. After the scene in which Diane opens the bedroom door and hears the roar, she goes to her room to sleep. While in a deep sleep, something foul smelling and transparent slips into the bed with her, but she doesn't wake up. Just before she goes to the Freeling house to rescue Carol Ann, Tangina checks into the hospital. She talks to and flirts with a young intern named Dr. Berman. During the Q&A, she tells him that she's been to the other side, battling a she-demon. His response is quiet, curious amusement. She admits to him that she is clairvoyant. Just then, a curious candy striper enters, asking questions about Tangina's special gift with a certain sense of wonderment. And after their conversation, Tangina goes to bed and puts herself in a trance. She enters the spirit world where she battles past the spirits Sekadu, Fantabel, and the tree spirit to reach a place where she can communicate with Carol Ann. She tells the child that in order to get away from the malevolent spirits, that she must go toward the spectral light but not to enter it. She further instructs her not to even look at it. Tangina awakens to find she has fallen out of bed and that the doctors are trying to revive her. Dr. Lesh displays the tapes of the footage that Ryan captured at the Freeling home at a meeting at the university to a room full of skeptical doctors. Because Ryan didn't get footage of the spinning bedroom or the strange dance of the three spirits, she can only describe them, causing many of the irritated professionals in attendance to leave the room. She passes around photos of Marty's bite mark to no great effect. And when she displays the tape of the ghostly woman, many dismiss her footage as a magician's trick and also leave the meeting. Finally, the only person left is one of Lesch's old colleagues, Dr. Anthony Farrow, who warns her that showing the footage may have been too much, too soon. He is curious about the objects that she has with her, the old jewelry that fell from the freeling ceiling, and in particular, a staple that he explains that morticians use to keep a corpse's mouth closed during funeral services. Now, by the way, this is the whole scene that was actually in the deleted scene with Ashley. Uh, that is exactly the scene that was leaked onto the internet by that Poltergeist fan. He then makes the suggestion that the jewelry may have manifested through some sort of electromagnetic disturbance due to all of the equipment in the house. After the meeting, Dr. Lesh goes to visit Tangina in the hospital, wherein Tangina informs her about the recent trance. They both agree that something has to be done. After Lesh leaves, Tangina tries to engineer an impromptu escape from the hospital. She visits Dr. Berman to say goodbye to him, wherein she kisses him. She then visits the young candy striper and tries to comfort her about her missing brother. Tangina tells the young woman that she sees nothing, but in reality, she has seen that the brother is actually dead. Before Tangina arrives, there is a scene in the living room which the family attempts with no luck to contact Carol Ann. Instead of Carol Ann, a strange apparition appears on the screen, the woman who appeared on the stairs, calling herself She Who Waits, and explains that she watches over the lost souls that the beast is holding at bay. After this, Lesh goes out to the backyard, wherein she meets up with Tangina. During the rescue scene at the moment, when Tangina calls out to the dead to cross over, she lies down on the floor and puts herself in a trance. After Tangina cleans the house, there is a scene at the dinner table in which the family gets a postcard from her vacation in Acapulco. We learn that the ordeal between the time that Carol Ann disappeared and the time that she was rescued occurred over 4 days. Dr. Lesh's story ends as she returns to the university, where she tells Dr. Farrow the whole story. He doesn't believe her, but he is fascinated. Just before Robbie is attacked by the clown, there is a scene at a bar which Teague is begging Steve not to quit his job. Then, when Diane runs to the children's bedroom, she's confronted by a smoky mist that turns out to be the waiting woman. As she watches, the face reforms into that of the beast. When the house implodes, Steve is standing in the street watching. In the movie, the family had already driven away. In the film, after the family piles into the motel room, Steve pushes the TV set out onto the balcony. In the book, he gives it a shove and rolls it down the sidewalk. So, yeah, there's quite a lot of differences when it comes to the actual film and the novelization, and that's just one of many reasons why I honestly really love novelizations. Like, there's a lot of novelizations out there that have extra details, extra depth to characters, complete sequences that were created either specifically for the novelization by the author or stuff that was from the script that ultimately was cut and or wasn't filmed. And it's a really fun and genuinely interesting way to see an alternate version of a film, and especially if you like a movie, if it's one of your favorites like Poltergeist is, it's just a really fun thing to do, to just read the novelization and just honestly see in your head like a different version of Poltergeist. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on the unseen Poltergeist. Um, Hope you enjoyed the video. I honestly had a good amount of fun talking about these unmade and deleted scenes from Poltergeist. Honestly, any possible reason that exists for me to talk about Poltergeist is always a positive, unless I'm talking about the remake or Poltergeist 3. But even then, Poltergeist 3, even if somebody was like, hey, talk about some deleted scenes and alternate stuff in Poltergeist 3, I would love talking about that too. I just really like talking about Poltergeist. Um, thanks for watching this video, and until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.